On my second interview up north in beautiful Traverse City, I'm going to talk about a person that we're going to talk about next, and that is Tom Kozelko. If I think there's a word humble in the dictionary, Tom's picture should be right with it. Tom is one of those guys that is family first, is team first. He always wants to give. He's the kind of guy I might not talk to for 4 or 5 months, maybe even a year. And when I do, we're on the same conversation. We can pick it up almost right where we left off. And we all know people like that, but Tom is just really genuine and extra special person. He was a great player at Toledo. Tom was in their Hall of Fame. In fact, Tom was the first-time MVP of the Mid-American Conference. He was a 2-time MVP and the first time an athlete's ever been the 2-time MVP. He was drafted by the Capitol Bullets, now the Washington, then became the Washington Bullets, and now I believe they're the Washington Wizards. But he was with the Capitol Bullets, and he had a 3-year career. He played with some great teammates, Wes Unseld, Elvin Hayes, Mitch Kupchak, Reardon, and just a number of great players. They got to the NBA Finals. Tom was one of the guys that's just a great teammate. In fact, when I was coaching at an up north school called Boyne City, because of the kind of teammate Tom was, he would bring some players up, and I remember him bringing Wes Unseld up to Traverse City and going over there, I think it was 2 years in a row, and learning from Wes Unseld and hearing that perspective. Tom's had a great influence on the game. He's a great teacher of the game. I should say after he played with the Capitol Bullets, he played in Italy. He went overseas and played, and he had some great stories that you'll see in the video about his experiences in Italy. Great teacher of the game. A lot of us will remember a person that Tom was a mentor to from Traverse City Central named Dan Marley that went on and had a very good pro career, a great pro career. Tom is a mentor to anybody that asks. If somebody wants help, Tom Kozelko, if he can, will help them. I'm here with a friend. I consider him a good friend, Tom Kozelko. I was talking to Dennis Starkey on the way up, and I'm telling him I'm going to see both you guys, and he says, say hello. I said, Tom's the kind of guy that I might not see for a year, and when I talk to you, it's almost like we just picked up the last conversation. I've known Tom for a while. I've introduced him in the video. And Tom had a career, I think, you know, to recap it, you were the first 2-time MVP of the Mid-American Conference. I was reading your bio, and that was what, 72, 73?
Yes, yeah, that would have been, yeah.
72, 73. And then he was drafted by the Capitol Bullets then. Now it's the Washington Bullets.
Correct.
And my son RJ is a big fan, but he loves this story. Tell him the story about how you found out that you got drafted by the Capitol Bullets.
Yeah, it was after my senior season at Toledo.
You heard this story, Gins?
No.
It's a great story.
Of course, you know, this was in 73, in the spring of 73, and of course we were finishing up the spring semester, and it got to the point where it was in May, starting to think about, you know, packing things up and heading home after the school year was over, and didn't know really at that time, you know, I definitely get a summer job, and then, you know, make plans from there. And I was in my dorm room, and somebody down the hall, there's one payphone at the end of the hall. We lived in an athletic dorm, and it was 5 floors, and we had one payphone at the end of our hall. And so I was in my room, and somebody came down, knocked on my door, and told me, well, there's somebody on the phone, said he's from the Washington Bullets, the Capitol Bullets, and he wants to talk to you. And so immediately I thought, okay, what's the trick? Somebody went up to the 2nd floor, now they're calling down to the 1st floor. They're setting me up for something. So I go down, and And I say hello, and the person on the other phone says, my name's Bob Ferry. I'm the general manager of the Washington Bullets, and I just want to let you know we drafted you in the 3rd round. And so I think, okay, who is this? Which one of my teammates is setting this up? And so I hesitated, and so I said, well, that's an honor, and I think, I appreciate it. It's a big honor for me, and I'm still trying to figure out, because I didn't know at that time the draft wasn't on TV, and I didn't know, social media. There was no social media at the time, and like I say, I was getting ready to head home, and so, after a minute, I finally felt comfortable in talking to him, and so the conversation went on, and basically he just wanted to set up a time, where I'd come out and meet with him, visit Washington, and so I went from there. But I had no idea that I was drafted.
That's one of my all-time favorite stories.
It was.
50 years ago.
Yeah.
50 years.
50 years ago, right. And I was just getting ready to head home, and I get the phone call, and again, I'm thinking, okay, what now are they going to pull over on me, teammates?
That's great. So, that was a great story. And now, when I was coaching at Boyne, you were probably the ones that brought Wes Unseld up, right? Or
yes.
No, when Jim Anderson and
Jim
Wes
Anderson,
Unseld.
Coach Anderson. Yeah.
So I remember coming over for that. Mm-hmm. So in so many ways, people impact the game. I remember as a young coach coming, and who else came? Did Kupchak came up once?
Yes. When I was with the Bullets, I played 3 years, and fortunately on a good team, and even more important, I was on a team that had a really good player, good, outstanding people as teammates. And Wes Unseld was on the team, Elvin Hayes. Got Phil Chenier. I don't know if you go back far enough, if you're older like us, you'll remember that name.
I remember.
Mike Reardon was a great player. He played at Providence with Jimmy Walker, as a matter of fact, and he was a small forward. And my 3rd year, we had Dave Bing on the team, and I was able to, fortunately, I was able to bring Wes Unseld up to Traverse City, and he worked some of the camps for Coach Anderson.
That was awesome.
Yeah, and then after my 3rd year, I got cut, but in training camp, I went kind of to the end of training camp, and I roomed with Mitch Kupchak. And so the year after Mitch Kupchak's rookie year, and I was playing in Italy at the time, so that following summer, Mitch Kupchak came up with Kevin Greavy, and they were here for a short period of time.
That's
and worked
awesome.
some camps, so.
That's awesome. One of my favorite books, do you ever read Playing for Pizza? About a semi-pro player from Italy?
Yes.
Did you? John Grisham book?
Yes, I remember that book.
I remember that book.
Yep. And that was in an era where you talk about players playing for the love of the game, and that's kind of the basis of that story. And you go anywhere in the world if you had an opportunity to play, and really there wasn't a lot of money involved, but again, you were playing for the memories and the love of the game. So.
Well, I remember too with Tom, we used to run a camp over at Northwest Michigan College. And we had about, I think some summers, we had close to 600 kids in 2 or 3 different sessions.
Yes.
And at night, Tom would come in and work, and it was a girls' exposure camp. But Tom would come in and work with a bunch of the girls in small groups.
Yeah.
And I thought he really, really did a lot as far as being a teacher and how important just that little bit extra, just getting a little bit of advantage that you were able to do. Back in the day, I used to play tennis with Jack McCluskey a little bit. Dick Parfit played, and McCluskey was a good player. So he let me go to a training camp when they were thinking about drafting a guy. And they talked, and I was ready to take notes, And all McCluskey said to the guy the whole time, I think you need to get about 2 inches lower when you pivot. You know, people think there's all this kind of great coaching where it really is more of refinement, you know, for the player at the level. And I think one thing I tell youth coaches all the time, it's better to undercoach than overcoach.
Yes.
Just undercoach them. Well, I don't know that much about basketball. I don't know if I can coach my kid. I said, they're in 4th grade. 5th grade.
Right.
You know more than they know.
Right.
You know way more than they know.
Yeah.
And just keep it really simple. Like get lower. That's why we kind of came up, catch the ball, look at the basket. If you're not looking at the basket, you know. Remember Tiny Archibald and the coach at Wolverine camps used to always say, Tiny Archibald had great basket area vision. You look at the bottom of the net, you know. Those are the things that kids need, and then they build onto it.
Yes.
So. Well, you and I talked on the phone a few times coming up. I'm going to ask you the same question I asked Dave.
Yeah.
If you were the guru of basketball, you could set a blueprint. What would you do differently? The same?
A couple of things that I see that are really kind of glaring. I think, first of all, and you touched on it with Coach Ginsburg, it just get the game back into the kids' hands, in the sense of putting it, encouraging more local participation. A local being driveway, neighborhood park, open gym, and making it almost like a feeder system where the young kids are being developed and pulled up by the older kids they're playing with in the neighborhood parks or the driveway. And I think the other thing too is that the enjoyment level is very important. And I think when you do that, I think that the camps, as you get older, the camps are fine, especially a team camp. If you take a high school team to a team camp with the players you're going to be playing with during the season, I think there's a lot of value in that. But sometimes I think, you know, we're getting away from the local basketball, just neighborhood basketball, so to speak, and what you talk about, and we're getting into more of a kind of a corporate experience by going to all the camps that are getting the kids more of a, I guess, getting them to become more, I'm trying to think of the term, but the camps are becoming corporate, and it just seems like it's more of a business than.
Well, it's a $1 billion industry. I mean, youth sports are a $1 billion industry.
Yeah.
And that's one of the last things Don told me. Don won the Jim Valvano ESPY Award.
Yes.
And they found out he had cancer. And my wife and Don Don would rib her a lot, and but they had a good relationship. But my wife watched it like 20 times, his ESPY Award. Did you ever see it when he got the ESPY Award?
Yes.
I said, Chris, I didn't know you loved Don that much. She goes, Rob Lowe is giving Well, I told Don about it, but I would always tell Don, like, I think that you would coach differently, kind of what I was telling to Gins about, because these kids, like, when I used to play across the street or drive my bike to Rogers Park to play, my mom and dad scraped up enough money to send me to Wolverine because I loved basketball.
Right.
Then towards my end of Wolverine or at camps, kids are coming to camp and this is their introduction to basketball.
Right.
And kids aren't playing as much, so to me to teach them like they were is wrong. And then if you go to an organized team, I was just talking to a friend of mine that works at camp in Atlanta, and he's saying, no, my 6th graders are getting bored with basketball. You know, they're on a middle school team. And then they have a supplemental middle school team for the better players in Atlanta. Then he's on a travel team. And I said, Sam, what you're describing to me would be like a laundromat. You put them in the wash cycle, you put them in the spin. Where's the kid having fun with all this? And we're like, you know who you are and what your game is. Well, okay, you're the foreman, You're the four person. Why am I the four person? Well, you're about 5'10", you're in this grade, and you run that offense. And I told RJ, we were driving around my son, and I said, you know, when I would grow up in the 70s, we protested everything. We protested long hair, we protested Vietnam, we protested drugs. We didn't know what drugs were, but we protested it.
Yeah.
If somebody would have told me to stand in the corner and run an offense in 5th grade, I'd have protested that.
Yeah.
I want to play those dudes on TV. And why are we taking that out? And that's sort of my mission here with the old man in the gym.
Yeah, you know, again, from my personal experience, I mean, I think we've talked about this. The first game I ever played in, when I had officials in uniforms, I was in the 7th grade.
Same here.
So before that 7th grade, it was just, you know, at school during, you know, recess or elementary recess or gym class, we'd play a little bit, or it would predominantly in the driveways or at the park. You'd find, you know, that year-round you knew pretty much where somebody would be playing at night or in the afternoons or on weekends, and so you would go and, you know, seek those places out, and you would find people. But I think the other thing too is that one of the things I would make sure, I think shooting instruction is awfully important, just technique, the shooting technique. Now, we never had, even in the 7th grade, we never were taught to shoot. You know, I think back, I think, well, you know, where did we learn to shoot? Well, we used to watch the one NBA game on Sunday afternoon, which was either Los Angeles, Boston, Los Angeles, New York, or New York, Boston. So we'd watch that game, and we'd be watching the players. Could be Jerry West or, you know, whoever for New York, and we'd watch them. Look how they're shooting. You know, they got the ball above their head. Look how they're holding. Then when the game was over, we would run outside immediately, and we'd go to the driveway or the closest park with a basket, and we'd try to emulate, you know, what we saw on TV, and that's kind of how we learned how to shoot. And you know, it wasn't really until I got to high school, my sophomore year, fortunately for me, we had a new coach my sophomore year. His name was Wayne Hintz. He was the coach at Elma College. He came to Traverse City and took the coaching position in Traverse City, and then he was also, you know, he was also a teacher in the system. But and he was, if it wasn't for that, I think it'd be safe for me to say that I may not even have gone out for basketball, and I certainly would not have been able to play beyond high school if it wasn't for Coach Hintz. Yeah, what he gave me, the confidence, the discipline, and just the basic skills that I needed for the ability I have to be successful.
One of the things I put in my second book that's about 80% done, I put two things in there. When you talk to kids, a lot of times they go back to a coach.
Yes.
There was a person.
Yes.
There was this person. And the other thing I always say is, I'll tell a kid or a parent, I say, okay, now name every teacher you ever had.
Yes.
Okay, now name every coach you ever had. They can name the coaches.
They name the coach.
They can't name the teachers.
No, that's
you know,
right.
And so they have such a big influence on their life. You know, and when I first got out of it, I'm going to confess that, okay, I'm coaching these little kids after I coached college for 30 years. But then I started seeing how important it was. You know, and you give them that little spark. And
yes.
One of the things I'm really on, this is jumping around a little bit, but I've called middle school after middle school and high school coaches, and I want to like get the survey. Like, when's the last time you saw a kid that in 7th grade was not a good player that ended up being a good player on the varsity?
Yeah.
I just asked the AD out in the hallway. So it's been a long time. We've had people say decades. Mm-hmm. Because my generation, we'd all ride the bike to Rogers Park and everybody's playing.
Right.
Everybody's playing. Well, some kids grew, they got bigger, some kids, you know,
yes,
somebody came through
yes.
that survival of the fittest, or
right.
whatever you want to call it.
Right.
But now they're not on a travel team, they drop out.
They drop out, exactly.
And there's like 20 million youth players and 500,000 play high school basketball.
Yeah.
No, that's not very good odds. I mean, people are spending a lot of money. So my thing in the book and what I'm trying to tell the parents, get them a good early start.
Yes.
Then they become good. And once a kid feels special, they want to do it. But if they
Yes.
feel like they're not special,
Yes.
they'll drop out.
Yes.
So I really think it's to, you know, and again, I don't know how many high school coaches are staying in one spot. Like Dennis Starkey at Petoskey, he was there for 20, 22, you know, I think he had the same JV coach for 18 years. That's not the norm anymore.
Oh,
you know,
absolutely
a lot of them
not.
had Saturday mornings. And so I believe, and I got to say this word right because my wife and daughter keep yelling at it. It's a Uber driver, right? I keep saying Uber driver. It's a Uber driver.
Yeah.
A parent should be more than a Uber driver and an ATM machine.
Right.
And that's really what they become. They drop them off
Yeah.
at one place, they write a check for
check
that
it out.
place, and then it's just kind of half standard. But if a parent gets involved, or they get a youth
Yes.
person, that one person that can get them involved, they can change a kid's whole course
Yes, absolutely.
of their career.
And I think if the parent, be it the mother, father, or even uncle, or
Yeah,
you know,
uncle, neighbor,
neighbor,
Yeah.
if they're going to get involved, then you have to learn and become. You know, you have to take on a coach's mentality. You know, like you say, if you're going to actually do the, you know, instruct the kids or your child, then you have to be a student of the game. And I think the other thing too, and you have to also know when to leave them alone. You know, if it's a constant push, and I think, you know, they have to get to a point where they feel a sense of their hard work is paying off, and they can almost feel themselves getting better, maybe every day.
That's a good
And that's
feeling.
why I get back to my high school coach. What he gave me, the discipline and the coaching, you know, the techniques and stuff. To, you know, at that time I was a post player, so obviously that, you know, he gave me the post techniques, that, you know, the skills. But he also built the confidence in me. So when I left the court or left the gym with him, I wanted to go out and get better on my own. And I reached a point in my sophomore year toward the end where I could almost feel myself getting better every day when I was working with him. I could understand. I understand what he was saying to me and what he was trying to accomplish. And then my junior year, each year I had that feeling, and that just promotes more confidence.
And it's like, actually, I interviewed Dean Lockwood with one
Yeah.
of that, and he said when people get that self-discovery, it's almost like it
Yes.
just drinks deeper in the roots.
Yeah, it
and
does, and
somebody's
it feeds on
telling you.
itself.
And then to get better on your own, you might appreciate this story, but Dean Lockwood, myself, and my daughter Ellie, he took us out for lunch. And he gives Ellie the old talk. Now, the off season, it was the summer, the off season. It's
The
very
off
important
season.
in your off season.
Yes.
Ellie looks at him back and said, I don't have an off season. My dad's got me on a soccer team. I'm on a golf team. I'm getting tennis lessons.
Yeah.
I'm playing basketball. I don't
Yeah.
have an off season.
Yep.
So I kind of changed in this little booklet I did, I called Off Time. And I took 6 shooting skills tests that they got to try to get better at 5 times during the year.
Yes.
With 20 minutes here, 20 minutes there. And that was kind of one of those eureka moments you talk
Yeah.
about again, is
Right.
these kids don't have an off season.
They don't.
Like in Sparta, back in the 70s, Mom would fill a milk jug full of water. She'd ice it. We'd wake up, that was our water for the day. We'd play baseball for a while, we'd play football for a while, we'd play basketball for a while. And then if your favorite sport was basketball, like mine was, we rode our bike to Rogers Park after dinner and went and play with guys.
Yes. Yeah.
Now, we don't have the interference of the cell phones, I
Sure.
get it. You know, kids aren't getting texting thumbs, I get it.
Yeah.
But if you get them to appreciate it and love it, I believe when a kid feels special, you really
Yes.
kind of got them.
Yes.
But you got to give them a substance
You really do.
to feeling special.
Yes.
And there's a really good book I read. It's called I, Last Chance to Save This Generation. And why is the internet. These kids are sharp. Like when I was a kid, remember the Roadrunner and the Coyote?
Yes. Absolutely.
Well, I thought, wow, that Roadrunner must really be fast. These kids were going there, oh no, wait a minute, the Coyote's faster
Yeah.
than the Roadrunner. You know, you can't play games with them.
Right.
But the why is then give them their why. Like these kids are less likely, and that's why I think youth sports are so important. These kids are less likely to take substance abuse now. They're less, but they're more depressed. They have more things. You know, they have more
stuff.
Yeah, it's like, you know, social media, people blame that. I mean, there's a lot of reasons, but there's so many good reasons why. We used to live on a county road where it's 1 mile there.
Yep.
So Ellie would shoot 400 shots in 7th grade, and she'd run down and back. I would say, Ellie, you know how special that is? That's real. I mean, that is special.
That is special. That's very
You're doing stuff what other kids don't do, and that's why I think if you get it young, but it's hard to teach that old dog new tricks.
And that's
it's hard to
self-discipline. Yeah.
And it's just the accountability. Even that book where she had to prove her score 5 times.
Yes.
That's a lot of accountability. And then I'm an older dad. I'm 17 years older than my wife, and I'm like, you know, she was kind of wanting to press and trap, and I'm like, oh, wait a minute, I want to play in high school and blah, blah, blah. But I said, look, every time you do something, I have to write a check to my kids. I got to write a check. I'm tired of writing checks. So every time I write a check, you got to work out 3 times on your own. Because otherwise, if you're not going to own in on it, I'm not going to write the check.
Yeah.
So I just think kids, it's a different generation.
It is. And getting back, you know, to my experience, I started playing in the organized, you know, the school, 7th grade, but I never went to a camp. I don't know about you or Coach
My parents
Ginsberg.
sent me to Wolverine camp.
Yeah, I never went to a camp, so that whole thing was kind of foreign to me when I, you know, at a point when I, you know, I got further down my career. But with the youth, it just seems like we've gotten to a point where we're forcing kids into deciding on one sport so early, and it just again, you know, we have to go back to our. When I was in school, very common to see people participate in 2 sports. Just a lot of, almost all the boys did, and once in a while you see a 3-sport athlete. You know, that you could do that. And now, I don't even know if you see very many 2-sport athletes nowadays. Probably track, cross country.
Our hardest part, Tom, was once we got the scholarship right in front of our face.
Yeah.
We played all the sports. And my son played on a Nike team out of Chicago. And if he would have said, look, I can't make the fall stuff,
Yep.
they would have said, well, it's
Yep.
been good to know you.
Yep.
You know, and he had a scholarship right in front of his face. They're flying him to practice, they're flying him to games. But the point is, what I'm trying to do is get somebody good enough they would have to make that choice.
Yes. Then that's almost like a business decision.
That they have to make a choice, they have to decide what they want to do.
And that's a great thing to have.
And I don't ever want to criticize any family for whatever they might do. That's just the way we happen to go. Speaking of that, did you see the sport that Jokic played when he was young?
I did. I was watching it the other night, and they mentioned it was water
Take a stab
polo.
at water polo.
Water polo.
But you see him with his hand up on top, and he looks away, and he makes those passes.
Yes.
They said in his country it wasn't unusual to walk by a pool, put his skivvies on, and play water polo.
Yeah. Well, you know, when I watch him play, it kind of, I get, I coach Ginsberg, and you know, you can go the post players back in the era when I played, and you know, you were taught keep the ball above your head, don't bring the ball down. If you threw it in, get it up high. If you get a rebound, keep it up. Don't, you know. And he's so good at that. And they said that's that water polo.
How about when he shoots off the wrong foot all the time?
Yeah.
With his left foot?
Yes, absolutely.
Unreal.
Yes.
The guy at Wolverine, Dennis Starkey and I were just talking about this today. The guy that ran Wolverine camps, Bill Ullenbrook, rest in peace, he always believed that it was going to go to more of a 1-foot shot game. And you see a lot of people shoot the floater, and a lot of there's so many things in like the taboos. Like, I think because I was a college coach, I could begin with the end in mind a little bit. Like, if you dribble down and you get double teamed, I'm dribbling, I get double teamed, I want to throw it over there, I got to throw a little hook pass over.
Yes.
You know, all these youth coaches are, no, you throw a chest pass. I feel like saying, you try to throw that chest pass over there. But a kid in the driveway, We figured it out. And that goes back to what I'm saying is this over-organization.
Yes, over-organization and over-control, like Coach Ginsburg talked about earlier, of like everything had to be so precise. You know, the pass had to be made, your foot had to be in a certain spot, and you know, it was so mechanical that I think eventually, you know, it just got to the point where a lot of times it wasn't fun to play that way.
But see, and this is where I think we played on the playground. So my impression of the youth coaches, my first coach, 7th grade, we were playground hot dogs. So he's going to go fundamentals, fundamentals, fundamentals.
Right.
Well, now when these kids are in 4th grade, it's fundamentals, fundamentals, fundamentals. And they don't have any chance to express and to find out who they are and what their game is.
Yeah.
I tell this story quite often, but when Ellie and Maisie, they both got pretty good. So the local trainers would say, bring them to my training session. I won't charge you. Mm-hmm. I'll just put them through a workout. And then so Ellie would be here, and Maisie had to do the exact same thing Ellie did. They just got in the line, and I call it follow the leader. Yeah. So after they said, what do you think? And I said, wait, Ellie and Maisie are totally different players, but you were trying to make them the same player.
Yes.
We can't judge the fish's ability to climb the tree. Mm-hmm. You know, if one's an apple, the other one's an orange, there's nothing wrong with that. Mm-hmm. And that's where I guess I've always thought basketball is kind of like a spirit game. Yeah. It's a spirit, you just kind of feel it.
Yes.
Why are we taking it away from our children? Yeah. Now I agree that things have improved, like their speed and their, and all this stuff. But I still think that if you talk to most coaches, I hear the word, they're just basketball dumb. I was sitting next to a parent who I really liked. He was from Manton. Mm-hmm. He's in a travel guy. I talked to him. He got up out of his chair. He couldn't take him on. I'm tired of watching my kid play like a robot. But that's how they're getting taught. Yeah. In my opinion, they're being taught like robots. Yeah. And it's a thing. And again, it's not everybody, and it's not every youth coach in America, but I think we've over-organized it to where, okay, it's $1 billion industry. They got 4 games on Saturday. I don't want my kids to be embarrassed, so we got to attack their zone, or we got to attack their press, or we got to attack that. So it's everything. Right. I see kids sitting on bleachers, 5 are walking through an out-of-bounds play, then they go sit down. The other 5 walk through the out-of-bounds play. And when I coached, we didn't have an out-of-bounds play. We just took it. We just ran all around. So as soon as the person gets a runner all around and throw it to them, Yeah. So I think it's sort of like winning at grade level versus player development. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a real fork in the road, because what wins at grade level isn't really good for player development. Yeah. And what develops players, I saw it firsthand. I always make the joke that I swam the Shawshank Redemption. I coached basketball. I had to come home and take a shower. Yeah. You know what I mean? So in 4th and 5th and 6th grade, I could have all the player development I wanted, but if they couldn't throw it over the top of the press, it didn't matter. Yeah. Tactics were going to win. Yeah. So I'm trying to get more freelance, more play, more structure. Hey, it's about being good in 7th grade. Sure. 8th grade's more important than 7th grade.
Along those lines, with Coach Ginsburg mentioned in Flint, the night they opened gyms and trying to get on the court, to play a game. And I talked when I was in Washington, guys that grew up in New York City or played, it was the same way in New York. You go to a park, and the winners would stay on, and if you lost your first game, you might be there all night waiting, trying to get back on the court. And so, it's just that, sense of, you've got to really urgency. That's right. And you can tell now, the shooting instruction now. That's why I say, I watch, especially the great shooters like Curry, and I mean, it's just something. You're just mesmerized. It's just beautiful to watch. I mean, the technique, and it's so fluid and it's effortless. To, from 30 feet or whatever you shoot from now, but you go back when I was playing in the NBA. In the 70s, Coach, you probably know this as well as anybody, and Bob, you probably, if you remember, it's almost like every player had a different shot, because I think they grew up playing in the parks, and you didn't have shooting coaches, you just went out and played, and you had scorers. Guys would score, and shots would, you know, the positioning of the ball would be off to the side, or, you know, different guys like Connie Hawkins would just pick it up off the dribble with one hand and shoot it. And, so you had all the different techniques. Vinnie Johnson, the guys that were just scorers, you know, they could shoot the ball, especially when they got in the lane and stuff. The ball positioning behind their head, up high, and you know, but they were scorers. They played, and they just had a sense. It was a sixth sense of what they had to do to get the ball, you know, up, and they could make shots because it
Remind me to tell you Connie Hawkins' story before I go.
Okay. Yeah.
With the hands, I think the soft hands.
Soft hands.
Like I tell parents this all the time. If I have to choose between great form and soft hands, jump ball.
Jump ball.
There's so many kids with great form that their hands are just like. So we did a lot. Actually, we'd have our kids juggle a little bit, just juggle a ball or just kind of hang around.
You know, and I think where nowadays where the technique is because of the distance. You know, they're shooting from that distance. I mean, obviously, mechanically, it's, I mean, you know, the way I shot, if I went out beyond the three-point line, I'd have trouble shooting because I always shot with the ball above my head and kind of behind my head. I kind of like.
In the first NBA Finals that they had, I think it was 82, the three-point line. I'm not sure that's the right year. And guess how many threes were taken the first year in the series?
In the series, the finals?
Probably not many.
Probably count them on two hands.
Seven.
And that's a bad quarter now.
Now it's 20 a quarter.
Is it 20?
So I mean, not all I have a number, but there's some quarters there's 20.
Absolutely, yeah.
I think that the three-point line, and I started a company called True Shooting. I think shooters shoot with turn feet. They rhythm the ball.
Yeah.
A lot of, you know, they used to tell my kids, and this is after coaching college, you know, keep it high.
Yes.
No, they can't keep it high.
No.
You know, they rhythm the ball up.
That's post players instinctively back. You just, as soon as you got it, you would just get it.
Well, everything was the power shot.
Yeah, and it was in close.
Now, here's my little bit of history. I think it started with the two-handed set shot. And then they allowed the one-handed shot, but they kept the 10 toes to the basket. But you always wanted to shoot close. Then once the three-point line, like I was talking about this the other day, what rule in any sport affected it more than the three-point line in basketball? I got one.
Dunk?
No, in another sport. What rule changed in another sport changed the game? I think it's the forward pass in football.
Yeah. Well, I didn't. Yeah.
I mean, I'm just saying. I mean, it really affected the three-point line. Has really affected this game. It's been unbelievable.
But it's taken such a long time to evolve to where we are now.
And then players start shooting it. You know, like one thing I think, you know, I was always taught to finish 2 inches closer.
Oh, God.
Well, now it's against the rules in the NBA to put your feet because they're going to drift forward and lean backwards.
Yeah.
There's like
when I was in college, I mean, without the three-point line, had you taken a shot at that distance, coach, you know, especially the first pass down across half court, if you get that first pass and back when there was no three-point line, had you been out that area, if you would have shot, well, you'd have been on the bench. You know,
unless your name was your name Pistol Pete.
Yeah,
right?
And I was talking to somebody, if you wanted to change the game completely again and get it back to the old days of, you know, like the Pistons, and what you would do is you would invert the value of the shot. Three points for any basket in the paint. 2 points for just inside the three-point line, but not in the paint. 1 point for the three-point. It would be a bloodbath, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I remember John Thompson used to say 3 for the dunk when it came out.
So
yeah, I think that there's a lot, and I think a lot of it is what I call fallacies. Like when I would go watch my youth kids, my kids, when I still coaching at Northwood, I still tried to be the dad that'd pick them up, get there early. You know how they taught them how to pass? They get across the free throw line and they would just throw chest passes back and forth to each other. You know how they taught them how to shoot layups? Were layup lines.
Yeah.
How many times do I get a layup line layup in a game? Or how many times can I pass the ball?
Yeah.
You know, they don't bring in, and that's where I'm kind of going back to teach them through play, because they got to
Yep.
deal with the defense.
Yeah.
They have to deal
Yep.
with, okay, not only is there a defense, there's a help defender
They
over
can't tell you
there.
what to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you
Tells
got
you what to do.
to kind of trust it.
My college coach, I mean, when we were working on passing and moving the ball, and so he would take a roll of red tape from the baseline directly underneath the rim, run the red tape, put the red tape on the floor, right up the lane, out through the top of the key, out to half court. And this red tape would be right in the middle of the court, baseline all the way up, directly underneath, splitting the court in half, one half court. So you'd have red tape. And so you get it and you go to reverse the ball. And he said, if you're going to make that pass across, the center of the court, that tape, he said, you better see the defense and you better know you can get it there. And then on the other hand, the person receiving, you shorten that pass. You don't make your teammate throw from the wing across that tape or from the side. You come and shorten that pass to cut that defensive player off.
And that's a great concept.
Yep.
Like I always tell my son, if they're going to throw it cross court high,
Yep.
go for it.
Yep.
Because it's a pick six.
Yep.
It's a steal, it's a layup. But if you go for a pass that's from the top to the ball side wing and you go for it, now you're exposing the defense. Yeah. So I don't think we can stop kids from learning
if that happens,
IQ.
if that point wing pass, if they make it and it's not a high percentage opportunity and it gets picked off, then that person who made the pass has to realize that his responsibility is to
get it there.
Yeah, don't compound a mistake by making a second mistake by not getting back on defense.
Or they got to get back on defense and make up for it. Yeah, because like I don't know if you read a lot of the John Gordon books, leadership books. I don't know what are they called. Name one.
The bus.
The bus.
Yeah.
But I think so much of, and it goes to is we're letting kids walk down the court. We're letting them complain about coaches. Like, if you ever went from like youth parents, and then after a game, the youth parents and the kids and some of the other kids, they'll go out to eat together. It's the most negative things you ever heard. They're negative. They're negative all the time. So I said, you got to teach kids to be a good teammate. My wife's on this committee at Freeland. She teaches at Freeland, and they want to teach kids how to cope. And so I got this whole big study. I said, send them to the playground. Have them go play and work out their problems.
With that, what you mentioned, 2 months ago, 2 months or a little more, I have a niece in Grand Rapids, and she has a son that's in the 5th grade, and he's playing basketball, and there was a big tournament, like I think it was AAU, I believe it was, at Michigan State University.
The Spartan Classic.
Is that what that was? Maybe it was.
There's a big one, yeah.
So my niece's husband was assisting with the coach. The guy that was coaching the team, but the coach had to be out of town. So my niece's husband had to become the coach, and he asked me if I'd come down and just sit on the bench and help him a little bit. And so we go down, and I mean, this is it was a big thing. I mean, all the facilities on campus, they're using some of the high schools. We played our first game at the rec center it was Saturday afternoon, and then the next 2 or 3 games after that, we played at some of the high schools. But God, it was just amazing. It was just teams from everywhere, and great team. You watch some of the teams play, and these kids are just so skilled one-on-one. It's just, but so we got down, our team, our first game, we got waxed pretty good by a team. I mean, we got beat pretty bad. And but the dynamics, you could see, the interesting thing about that was that when you have that type of adversity through an entire game, the dynamics between the kids, the players, and then the players and the coach, that they, as they come off, if they get substituted out, what is you watch them, how they interact with the coach when they're trying to talk to them, and then the team within the group in a timeout or during between quarters, how they interact with each other. And then also at the end of the game, when the game was over and they finished going through the line to shake hands, watching the dynamics of the kids going, instead of coming back to the bench as a group to be with the coach, they're instinctively going to their parent or their whoever their group of people are, then they're separated out. And I thought that was really interesting, was telling that, you know, after the game, they, you know, instead of coming and listening to the coach would want, you know, and he had to force them to come back over to talk to him, you know, not only about the game, but to say, okay, here's our next, you know, give them the schedule for the next game. But it was really fascinating where they just dispersed to their groups.
Well, some people believe when they pay money, they call the shots.
Yes.
Well, that's part of what I think is wrong, in that these youth teams it's money driven.
Yeah.
You know, it's a $1 billion industry.
Yes,
I can only imagine what the local community in Lansing made at that tournament between hotel. I mean, there's a lot of money involved. Well, the teams are money driven.
Right.
So they you know, so if it's money driven, who's always right? What are we taught in business? Who's always right?
Yeah.
The paying customer.
The paying customer.
They're always right.
Yeah.
And I think that to me is a bad thing. Like, so little things I did that some coaches might get from is when, like, we have certain rules. If you didn't sprint back on defense, automatically out. You're automatically out. If you didn't hustle, I mean, we try to come up with trying to build their character a little bit. You know what I mean? And it's hard, but through the game we wanted to do that. You know, if they showed frustration, we tried to show them how to change their frustration. If they clap once, and then they're just little kids, but now when you clap once, you're frustrated, clap 5 times. You know, you just try, because they're young and they're impersonal. And I think if you teach them right, we had a guy in town, he owned Frick's Bar, but he did really well. Yeah. And he always said, Bob, if a kid learns it right, they'll never lose it. You know, so I always kind of remember that with our kids. You know, if they learn it right the first time, you don't have. That's why I think the youth coach is gold. Yeah. Like if I was ever a varsity coach again, I would try to go to those youth coaches, and I would try to get them on and just let them know how important they are. And because if a kid, the problem is, I agree with what you're saying. They're going the opposite way. They're going to BW3s and. They're overhearing their parents say, Johnny shoots it every time he gets it, so when you get it, you shoot it too. Yep. And that's, you know, so I developed in the book, I don't know if you ever read it, I call it the 5-star. Every practice should be fundamentals, concepts, instincts, but it also should include being a teammate and being tougher. So the one thing I always tried to do with every practice was have them fail. I'm going to put them in some drill. They're probably not going to make it. Right. And that was kind of the point when I developed that shooting book. They got to beat their, it's what's the shit? We had a test where how many you could make in a row. And I really got into streak shooting because we had a great middle school coach named Mark Jungle in Midland. And every time was a streak, because every time they're in a streak, every shot mattered. I used to go, how many can make out of 10? How many can make? No, you got to make them in a row. that puts a lot of pressure. But if they don't, so when let's say they got 10 in that test, they can't write a score to the next side until they broke 10. So they could be out there for 20 minutes and never beat their best score. But isn't failure part of?
That is a big part.
And I think parents and youth coach, they try to shelter kids. They, you know, and that's where I'm kind of like, I was older than my, no, this ain't floating. You know, I'm from a different generation back. So, but I think all that's really good, and I think to me it's in the hands of the youth coach, and that's sort of my mission, and that's why I appreciate you guys having me here.
Well, you know, I just touching back on that tournament at Michigan State when I went down, and the other thing that was interesting was when a player came off the court, he immediately would go to, you know, the coach that was my niece's husband was coaching, would substitute, and he'd be standing up and he'd want him to come back. And a lot of times they would just go to the end of the bench, and then he would have to go
To them.
and pull them down to talk to them, to get them to tell them what he wanted them to do, or what the team was trying to accomplish. And it was it's that same thing of just almost this feeling of separation from the coach and the team. And it got to the point at the end of the tournament, I was almost ready to get the team together and say, did anybody have any fun playing basketball this weekend? It was just, but they, their own way. I mean, thank goodness the last game we were competitive. But still, it was interesting to see the dynamics.
Interesting.
It's just, within the kids, how they reacted to the coach. And
my friend Don Meyer, who he had a real, like, things I copied from him that, I've talked on some of my video, but if you are out of a drill, say me and you are doing it,
right,
and Gins is off the drill, he has to mimic coaching one of the two of us. So maybe, Tom, you gotta stay low, you gotta stay low. So he's always kind of involved. You know what I mean? Or, pass and cut, or whatever we're working on, the group out has to mimic.
Right.
And I thought that was really good. And the other thing that Don did that I copied, and actually I did it in practice a little bit, but we might have a practice and I might call Sadie over and say, Sadie, we're gonna give a water break, and when we come back, you gotta get them in this drill.
Right.
So after the water break, Sadie called them all over and had to get them in that drill.
Yeah.
So I think it's, you can teach leadership, you can teach teammates, and what better role do you have than you're paying all this money to be on a team. Those things are maybe more important than the play. And so in my book I talk about a lot with parents. I actually went into what I called 4 if factors. If number 1, it should be inexpensive and fun. There's no way my kid should be learning a game at the community center and I'm walking around the track and the coach is yelling at her, the parents are yelling at her. That's just wrong.
Right.
Then I think we should teach instincts and feel. Those are the things that's going to separate a kid. Then I say integrate the fundamentals. Like, I didn't like them passing across the free throw. I wanted a defensive. I want to play monkey in the middle or play, We had a rule that if I throw a pass and you tipped it out of bounds, it's your ball. Because I should know a throw a pass that gets tipped out of bounds. So you're always trying to get better.
Right.
And then I said the intentional foundation. My kids would come home like every other kid and they'd complain about the coach. My first response was, well, how good would you be if they didn't complain about that? You were good enough they didn't have that as a complaint. Well, I'd be pretty good. Well, every time I pass the ball to so-and-so, they don't pass it back. Well, why don't you go talk to so-and-so? Like, to me, why are we cheating these kids out of this growing experience? And we're going to bring Giddens in and we're going to wrap it up.
Can I make one?
No, you can have the whole floor.
One more,
here.
just getting back onto like shooting. 2 things from my experience. I don't, normally if somebody asks me on the shooting tech, I don't, because my technique was not a textbook. And part of the reason, and I found this out back when I was helping coach after I finished playing a little bit here in Traverse City at the high school level, kids that were, with the shot, and we had a couple kids that were really struggling, and I tried to get their hand in position, and it's like they physically could not. They were so stiff in the elbow and the wrist, and I've come to find out I've got a stiff wrist. When I try to lay my wrist back, my wrist goes like this far. I can't, so I've got a stiff wrist, and and so consequently, if I tried to shoot here, and I think that's one of the reasons I developed my shot was up back in here, because then I was compensating, and then it was all up in here. And so I think for parents, if you're going to, it's important to learn techniques of the shooting if you're going to teach your kid, because I think it's difficult to teach them one technique and then a year or 2 later with another coach, that coach is teaching another technique, and then maybe and it's you know, I think that also is very important, the continuity of something like teaching. Now the other stuff, defense, I mean, that's hustle, effort, but there is technique, obviously, but something as important as shooting, continuity in the instruction as they go on, as they move forward.
For those of us watching, you can go to my YouTube. I call it True Shooting.
Yeah.
And one thing, I had 3 kids, and they all 3 are in the MHSA record book. And we said they had a shot they never had to change at 8. They owned their shot at 8 years old.
Yeah.
And we kind of went to that Einstein theory. If you can't explain it to an 8-year-old, you probably don't know it. 2, we want them to be able to explain their shot in 8 seconds. See, I think sometimes when I watch shooting coaches do it, it's almost like they want selling points.
Yeah.
I'm trying to make this point or that point. And I think it's kind of a natural feel,
right.
and you know, and we kind of say turn feet. You know, my coach told me to square up and get my butt down, and we call that like a constipated pencil. You know, you look like a pencil that's got to take a poop. And we wanted to get relaxed and just shoot.
He came to Washington, and I was shooting. I was in working out with him shooting, and he says, "Tom," he says, "you got to, you know, bring that forward and get it down, you know, out in front more." And so I said, "Okay, let me try." And I started trying, and I couldn't. My wrists wouldn't bend back far enough. So I said, "Mike, I can't. This is how I'm going to have to. I can't. You know." So I'm saying, once in a while you run into somebody that's just. Well, Bill Walton, remember, he used to shoot.
Yeah.
He would shoot like this.
Yeah, he had a funny shot.
He'd bring his elbow way in, but you know, he was a Hall of Fame player. It's like, repetitive. You know. Yeah.
By the way, I think shooting. I teach it. This middle finger, you got to see it go over the front of the rim.
Yeah.
You got to see that finger go over the front of the rim. Yeah. Here's a couple things. My favorite.
No, you're good right there. It's good.
Here's a couple things I used in coaching to explain where it fits in their life. I tell them you got to have a priority list of 5 things to live your life properly. Okay, I figured this out late, and I used it. Number 1, you got to have faith in God or some kind of spiritual. That's got to be number 1 in your life. You got to believe there's something bigger than you out there. You're not the biggest thing. Your father, your mother. You got to believe in God or a spiritual belief. Number 2, your family has to be second on your priority list. They're the most important people in your life, no matter what. Things go bad, they're going to be there for you. Number 3 is your education. Your daily investment in your life is number 3. Now, I haven't said anything about sports. 4 is your special interests. Basketball, football, music. That's 4th on the priority list of 5. And 5 is everything else. Parties, girlfriends, boyfriends, stupidity. If 5 becomes number 1 or 2, you may as well hang it up. I used to use it, I was thinking of college, because that's what happens. Kids fall out of college because 5 becomes, you know, going to parties. So God or spirituality, your family, your parents, your siblings, your education is number 3, your sport is 4, and everything else is 5. Here's the other thing. I talk because I wanted to take pressure off the team. Imagine your success in life is represented by a pie, and it's split in 8 pieces like a pie. This pie represents your success in life. Because kids overemphasize the importance of a sport. I hate to say that. Or overemphasize. They spend all their time thinking about one thing. Each piece is equal importance in your life. And one piece is your involvement in basketball. Now you say, well, it's only 1/8 the importance. No, give it your full attention. But your education, your relationships in your community, your mental health, they're all important. It's not just this. It's not just that. It's important. It's big.
Absolutely.
My Connie Hawkins story. You ready?
Okay. Yeah, I
went to see Dan Marley play. His 3rd year in the league, I went down there and spent a week with him in Phoenix because he had 3 games at home that week. So the night before the last game, and I had seen Connie Hawkins uniform in the rafters. He played for Phoenix Suns for a short.
Yes.
And they retired. So I said to Marley, I said, God, Connie Hawkins. He says, oh yeah, he works for the team. He's the community liaison or whatever. I said, Connie Hawkins is around here? He said, yeah, I'll try to get him. So I'm standing in the locker room waiting for Marley to get done after the third game. All of a sudden, I feel these tentacles come over my shoulder like they were his fingers.
Yes.
These fingers were that long.
You take a NBA basketball, look like a grapefruit.
He says, are you, and I hear this voice, kind of a deep voice. He says, are you Marley? Were you Marley's college coach? I said, I was one of them. I turned around and I said, Hawk! You know, I lost it. So I said, hey, you got to go out with us tonight. We're going out. He said, well, you'll have to ask Mr. Marley. I said, the heck with Mr. Marley. I was his coach. I'm not going to ask him if you can come. You're coming with us. So he and I rode together. I was with him all night. Oh, boy. We drank. We had laughs. We talked. You know, we talked about Marley coming from Traverse City. He couldn't believe. He said, God, how could this guy's tough? You know, how could he? So finally, the night is over. He drives me back to the hotel. I'm catching a flight back to here. Well, Flint. I was in Flint then. And let me go back. There was a guy in Grand Rapids named Delton Hurd. Delton Hurd ran the recreation gym that Melvin McLaughlin did all his preparation in. And Delton Hurd was 6'5", big chest, powerful body, black guy, older. And he used to brag to everybody in Grand Rapids, all the black guys, how good he was in college. He played at South Carolina State. There was a HBCU. Nobody believed. Delton Hurd, come on, quit talking about yourself. So we get up to the hotel, and I said to Connie Hawkins, I said, I got to ask you one question. You ever heard of a guy named Delton Hurd? He turned off the car, turned in his seat, and looked at me like I was somebody. This is Connie Hawkins. He says, Delton Hurd is one of the best players I've ever seen. I saw him get 39 in the first half one night. So he's telling me all this stuff. So I land in Michigan. I'm driving from the airport. I called Delton Hurd. I said, Delton, on behalf of all the adults in Grand Rapids that doubted you, I apologize. He said, what are you talking about? I said, I was with Connie Hawkins last night, and he told me how good you were. And man, that's every time, you know, poor Connie died recently. He passed away a couple years ago. But I always remember what he pulled in and turned the car off. And he, like he was getting ready to talk about JFK or something. Yeah,
right.
Don't hurt.
Yeah. You know, the other thing about Connie, you remember this, back when
he was Dr. J before Dr.
Right, and he was ABA with Dr. J and was all the very showy. I mean, it was great basketball. There were a lot of the best players.
Yeah.
But when the ABA NBA merged, the players from the ABA came in the NBA. They blackballed. Remember he was blackballed.
Well, he gambled or something, didn't he?
And then he sued the NBA and eventually won the lawsuit, and that's when he got in. And he was with the Lakers for a while.
Yeah, Lakers and then Phoenix.
Phoenix. Yeah.
I read his book Foul.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I read Foul.
Playgrounds.
But if the video was mentioning it, it's just like, well, kind of remember the name, but you don't know. Go on YouTube.
It's a mixture of Dr. J and George Gervin.
Yeah. Go watch him on YouTube.
But his hands.
He was amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But he was a guy who's like Dr. Those guys in New York, they grew up on the playgrounds and they knew, they just would play.
And that's where my emphasis is. Now, I'm not saying don't go to the trainer. I'm not saying, but you got to supplement.
Exactly.
Don't lose this instincts and feel like, I'm going to talk to him Thursday, but Campy had my son. He recruited my son. Went down to a practice. And he gave a practice. Now, when they do this, we do that. If they do this, we do. Everything was tactical.
Yep.
And so after practice, he said, Bob, what'd you think about practice? And I said, my standard line's always, you want truth or you want harmony? He said, I'll take the truth. And I said, other than you using the F word about 30 times, That's not how you practice when I coach here, because I coached there along with him for 15 years. Because he was more of a motion, a Bobby Nichols kind of freelance, and he said, Bob, that's what we're getting handed up. We're getting handed up kids that only react to something.
Interesting.
You know, like if you watch a normal youth practice, if a team plays a 2-3 zone, they're going to yell out Providence or Syracuse, and the kid knows that.
Yep.
Well, what I taught my kids, and I'm not saying did everything right, but we would say triangulate the zone. Get between the guard and the forward. So you make a triangle. Don't stand by one or the other.
Force them to make a decision.
And they might make a bad decision, and then if somebody throws you the ball and the forward took you, dribble the ball up.
Yeah.
If the guard took you, dribble the ball down. So you make a bigger triangle for the next person to come through, you know. And then we said, zones can't rebound the weak side. So let's get 2 people on the weak side, you know. Then we said that you can get the ball inside easier against a zone than a man. And we also said zones have a hard time in transition because the guards get back and usually they're on top of the zone. Okay, now do you want your 6th graders to know that, or do you want them to know the Providence play?
Yeah.
And that's where I think I'm trying in my small way to try to create that
you're right,
feel, the playground,
the instincts,
the concepts. But I want to understand a concepts. Then my instincts are better. Like RJ my son got really good at throwing that hook pass. Well, he drove. They helped from the low side. They helped the helper. They jumped. So he just hooked it over there. Well, I think if I wasn't, most of his coaches wouldn't allow them to do that. They would say, you throw a chest pass, you pivot back. And there's so many, like I call them fallacies. But the biggest thing that a youth coach can do to me, like I'm going to ask you guys this question. Play on an elite travel team or play against kids 4 or 5 years old. Which one's going to progress you further?
The latter. For me.
That's not even close for me.
Yeah, the latter.
Yep.
Get spanked a little bit.
Well, when RJ was in 7th grade, he was going up playing with the varsity players at Dow. When he was in 9th grade, Jeff Reckway, the coach at Northwood, he could go up and play with the guys at Northwood. Playing with older kids has always been a better. What I'm trying to say to people out there, there's formulas that have worked, and they've always worked. And just because there's another option doesn't mean we forget about the other option.
Yeah.
If you can tell me my 7th grader can go up and play with seniors and play basketball for 4 hours, or I'm going to get in a car and drive 3 hours and play against pretty good kids his age.
Yeah.
I mean, you guys both said it, but
yeah.
You know, can I just
one
story?
Yeah,
when I was at Toledo, 2 players that lived, they're from Toledo. Steve Mix, of course, you know, if you have to go back to look, you know, he played 10, 12 years in the NBA.
Great player.
And Butch Comives, Howard Comives, played at Bowling Green. His senior year was the leading scorer in the nation.
Yeah.
He played with the Knicks, and then they traded him to Detroit.
Yeah.
Pistons, and they were both from Toledo. So when I was down at Toledo, the off season, the summer, I'd stay down there, and every night, of course, back then, you know, that was in the 70s, so every school had an old field house, you know, everything, you know, especially in the Mid-American, we had old buildings. But they had 2 auxiliary gyms upstairs, and there's just basically I think they were for PE classes, just the box, you know, the backboard and the 4 walls. And so every night, you know, about 5:30, 6 o'clock, they would be playing up there. Steve, Butch Comives, and then another guy that played at Bowling Green.
Nate Thurman.
Well, Nate Thurman, but Walt Piakowski.
Oh, yeah.
He played, and his son played was at Nebraska. Eric.
Yeah,
and
remember him.
So Walt would come in, it was Steve Mix, and then my teammates, and we'd get up there, and we would just play. I mean, it would just be nonstop. Maybe if you sat out a game, but it was just
high-level games.
And it was, you know, it was, there you go.
The play, like, RJ played on a team, and we're always thankful for Ty Streets. Ty Streets has been great to us, but we would go to Chicago, we'd practice. I'd go watch, I just like watching practice, but Wes Matthews would come in, and some of the other guys that played around Chicago, the pros. And you know what they all wanted to do with the kids? They wanted to play one-on-one.
One-on-one, yeah.
They didn't come in here and say, here, I want to show you this trick move.
Teach them.
Play.
They want to play one-on-one.
Yeah.
And that's how Wes Matthews would work out a lot.
Yeah.
He would just play one-on-one. Then he'd go shoot on the basket and work on his drills. But I think you got to mix in. I've always said one-on-one's the best teacher.
Yeah.
I don't know how you guys feel.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
I agree.
To be able to guard it, to be able to play it, and that's the start.
And to be able to have to put the ball. I mean, you're forced to do something.
I told you, the coach, assistant coach at Michigan, what's his name? The older guy.
Phil Martinelli.
Martinelli, when he was a head coach at, it's not Temple, where was he?
St. John?
Yeah, he was coach of the year in the country one year. His players every day came in and played one-on-one every day for like a half hour. He swore it was the difference between his team and everybody else.
When you were at Central, coach, I mean, you guys must have had, when you had Roundfield, Poquette, I mean, McElroy, I mean, guys, I mean, when they were off season, they're
4 pros.
And playing pick up in the evening.
And even after that, when Dave Grouser was a great player. Grouser, he lives here. We have coffee. I'm having coffee with him in the morning. He swears by one-on-one. He said he grew up in St. Clair Shores. He went all over the city and played with all black players.
Well, the other players we talked about earlier, Ben Kelso.
Yeah.
You know, God, he was a tremendous competitor.
Kelso, but he was old. Don't forget, he was a 24-year-old freshman.
I'll tell you a story. After my senior, his senior year, you guys joined the Mid-American Conference, and we were seniors both at the same time. Well, I get a call after the season. There's another call. Actually, it was through one of the coaches. He said, "Hey, there's going to be the Globetrotters are playing at Western Michigan University in 2 weeks or whatever, and they are looking for some local players, Mid-American players, particularly to play, on the Washington Generals, with the Washington Generals." He said, "Would you be interested?" I said, "Yeah, I'll go." And he said, "The other player they're going to have is Ben Kelso. So you guys will be with the Washington Generals." So, it was on a Saturday night. So
Kelso probably took it seriously.
But here's what he did: we get to the field house at a couple hours early. The guy says, "Show up, couple. We'll be there waiting." And so I get there, and Kelso's there, and so we go in and meet the guy that's set the thing up, the manager. And so he says, he said, "Well, let's go in the locker room, meet the players." So we walk in the locker room, and both teams, the Washington Generals and the Globetrotters, are kind of in the same lot. They're mixed men, and they're all playing cards together. And so, but that was with, all those great, players from the Globetrotters. And so the guy says, "Well, here's what we're going to do. We're going to start the game, and we're going to go through our routines. And then after 4 or 5 minutes, we're going to sub you in, and then we're going to play regular basketball for another 3 or 4 minutes. Then we'll sub you out, and then we're going back to our routines." And that's how the game went. So it was interesting. Yeah, it was good. I mean, Ben was great. He was, he was licking his chops.
Yeah, he was a tough customer. He was
he was a player.
Parf pulled a fast one there. See, he didn't play high school basketball. Played in the City League in Flint. So Parf heard about him, went down, took him, and the rest was history. He was a terrific college player.
And then he had a great coaching career afterwards.
He did. Yeah. He won 3 Class A state championships in a row. Cooley.
Yeah, he was something.
I got to tell you a quick story, Glenn Rice story. Glenn Rice and Sugar McLaughlin, Melvin McLaughlin. Because if he was coming out of college now, he'd be a lottery pick. Yeah. The way the game is, the 3-point, he was, it's the best I've ever seen. Other than Steph Curry, but he's a little shorter than Steph. Anyway, a guy was writing a book on Melvin McLaughlin and his career, and he kept bugging me, calling me, asked me to write the foreword, which I did, the foreword in the book. It's pretty good. I felt pretty good about it. But he wanted to get these quotes from different guys, and one of them was Glenn Rice. I said, I recruited Rice hard, but we didn't get him. And I said, you can't get those guys on the telephone now. He's down in Miami. I heard he said, please get a hold of Rice, see if he can get a quote on Melvin. So I called a guy in Flint who used to be a police liaison officer at Flint Central when I was working at Flint Central. And he went to high school with Rice at Northwestern. And I said, is there any way you can get in touch with Glenn Rice and have him call me? Now, maybe he won't remember me. So 5 minutes later, I get a call from, it said Florida, but no, I didn't know who it was. Normally, I don't accept those calls.
Yeah.
But I'm thinking, it may be Rice. So I said hello, and he said, Coach, you'll never guess who this is. I said, Glenn Rice. He said, how did you know it was me? I said, well, your boy. I just called. So we talked. We had some fun. And I said, the reason I called, I wanted to get a quote, if you would, for this book on Melvin McLaughlin. He said, let me tell you something. A few years after he was done in the NBA, he was home visiting his mother, and a guy asked him to play in one of those all-star games where, they get a bunch of guys, pros, at Lansing Community College. And he said, I went in there. I said, sure, I'll play. I go in there, and I see this little bitty guy at the other end shooting around. And then a guy right before the game says, that's Melvin McLaughlin. And he remembered that I had told him, this is how good I think he is. He said, I scored 62 in that game. This is Rice. He said, that little son of a gun scores 67. He said, I could not believe. Now, this is long after his time at Central. He said, that little guy, if he was coming out now, he'd be, he'd be high. First round, second. Yeah, right. I got him on the phone. Guy didn't think I could do it. I felt good about it.
That's cool. Yeah. Well, to the audience, we're wrapping it up here.
Yeah.
These are the kind of guys I'm talking to try to get youth basketball better. So I appreciate it. And they stay in touch. And we're trying to find the very best things that we can find for the game. And the one thing I always told our kids is go talk to the alumni. Because I never had an alumni come back and say, you know what, Bob, I think I worked too hard when I was there. They all wish they would have done a little bit more, but they all love it. Like you guys are. We're all in our above 60.
Absolutely.
And we still remember the times that we had.
Yeah.
And do you guys ever see The Office? Are you old enough to ever watch the show? The Office? Yeah. RJ has one quote in his bedroom. It's Anthony Bernard. And it said, I wish somebody would have told me when I was in the good old days that I was in the good old days.
Yeah.
That's a good one. Yes. That's a really good one.
That's a good one.
I tell them, like, you guys are in the good old days. And when I tell them in 5th and 6th grade, before you know it, you're either going to be on this team or not be on this team, and you're going to be in the good old days.
Yes.
So, thanks, Tom. Always
Always a pleasure to see you.
Thanks for asking us.
Oh, we'll do it again. Yeah. In wrapping up the interview with Tom, the one thing that probably moved me the most was how he credited his high school coach to even taking him to maybe, he didn't even know if he's going to play in high school, to the great career that he had, to where he's in Toledo's Hall of Fame, got to play in the NBA and play at the highest level and meet the highest players in the world. And he credits a coach. And one thing I always tell youth coaches, or I always tell all coaches, you never know what effect you're going to have on a person. And a coach is a very, very big part of youth life. Tom is humble. He's a great teacher. We ran a camp up in Traverse City for years, and Tom would come in at night and he'd work with the kids. And I think that was very evident when I consider a person humble, like in his interview, he was asking a lot of questions. He still wants to get better. He still wants to help his nephews and their teammates get better. So Tom is a person that I hope you enjoyed the interview. He's one of the people I really, really, really enjoy being around. There's a Tom Kozelko, maybe not as prominent as an NBA player, but there's Tom Kozelkos in your area. There's people that can really help your youth and help your kids get better, and I would sort them out. I would seek them out because those people really want to help. And Traverse City is tremendously blessed to have a Tom Kozelko, but in your area, there might be somebody you could find that could come back and give influence, and I think you'd be surprised at how much they want to give back. So I hope you enjoyed his interview, and then as you can tell, these guys, they didn't come in just to do a interview. they wanted to be a part of it, and they wanted to help. So they both stayed in the room when the other one was speaking, and Coach Ginn's enthusiasm kept coming, so we just brought them all in together, which is the first time in one of my interviews from the old man in the gym. But I hope you learned from these two guys at the end. I hope you learned from Tom a great deal. Thanks for tuning in to the old man in the gym, Conversations with Bob Taylor. Thank you.